You're listening to Titans of the Trades. I'm your host, Ryan England, author of Hire Better People Faster and creator of the CoreFit hiring system, a proven process to help growing companies attract and retain only the best. I'm on a mission to revolutionize the perception of the trades and elevate it to new heights. After growing up in a blue-collar family, my passion for making the trades cool again runs deep. If you're a titan in the industry and want to be on my show, stick around until the end and I'll reveal how you can be my next guest. I'm your host, Ryan England. Welcome back to another episode of Titans of the Trades. On today's episode, we talk about something that is unique to a lot of small businesses, and that is how do we retain our best people? Or even better, how do we compete for some of the key talent that's out there, whether that's someone to help us run operations, build a sales team, or even take care of all of our customers. And today's guest has developed a platform that not only makes this easier for you, but it makes it very easy to manage long term. We're going to talk about how you can actually share in some of the upside to keep your best employees, attract the best employees, and really make retention just a little bit easier. So I want to welcome to today's show the founder of Reins, Chris Buttenham. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
So it's no secret that the trades, there's a labor crisis. We've all heard about it. We got a bunch of people that are aging out of the system. And the reality is construction, the trades, it can be pretty brutal on the human body. And so they're aging out, but there's not as many people coming into the industry as we need. So we need to hold on to people as much as we can. I think that for a lot of companies out there, they put a lot of emphasis on hiring, but really the problem is retention. And how do we retain people? And sometimes it's a good culture, sometimes it's good training and leadership, but sometimes it's just straight up, they know that they're in it to win it, and there's something in the long run for them financially. And I think that's where you guys come in. So
yeah, that's right.
I'd love to hear a little bit of background on that. And if you don't mind sharing with our listeners what it is that you do, and then we'll just jump in.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Ryan. So I'm one of the owners of a company called Reins. Fundamentally, we help small or privately held businesses, usually home service or trades types business, keep their key employees. And we do this through equity and profit sharing type incentives. So we are sort of operating under the assumption that equity works, skin in the game works, right? Aligning incentives works.
Yeah.
But I can talk a little bit about my background and how we got into this, because I think it's a little interesting.
Yeah.
So in my past life, I owned another technology company. And in 2021, my business partner and I, we sold the company, and we knew we were going to do another business. We're lifelong entrepreneurs. But we couldn't imagine ourselves selling software to software companies anymore. And so we did a few months of soul searching and tried to find something that we could really sink our teeth into, something we were really passionate about. And that's when we fell in love with this idea of helping, privately held owner-operator type businesses across America. Mostly inspired by people like my dad, who's a small business owner. And at the time, every time I'd call him, he would tell me, yeah, I'm so tired of getting on a ladder at 63 years old, what have you. And I think he's not alone. A lot of small business owners, owner-operators are in the same boat. And I had watched him try and sort of give a portion of the business to his general manager so he could start to step back from the business. And I watched him struggle with that. And that's when we discovered the problem for Reins and the lack of options, the lack of tools for primarily LLCs, S-Corp type of businesses.
Small businesses.
Small businesses to give equity and skin in the game to their key employees.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that I know a lot of owners that they want people to be invested. They use that term all the time. I wish they were just invested in the company. How do I make sure they're invested in the company? And there's a couple of ways, I think. One is they're emotionally, they're mentally invested, right? Like they love the people they work for. They love where the company is going. Culturally, they fit. They're invested. But then there's this other side of it that I feel actually has maybe a little bit more teeth, if you will, or a little bit more like handcuffs, where they can be financially invested. And there's an opportunity for them to have some skin in the game, be able to essentially cash out when the company does really well, exits, those kinds of things. And I think for a lot of small business owners, we hear about it, we know about this thing, but we don't know about it. We don't know how to do it. We don't know who to trust. We don't know how to make it happen. And that's the problem that Reins is solving. Is that correct?
That's correct, Ryan. And this is something, well, these are, of course, the folks I talk to every day. Like my cousin told me about phantom stock, or my CPA like mentioned, oh, you should look into this type of thing to retain these key employees. And there's just a lack of education about it on the market. And essentially what I would encourage folks to think about is two types of incentives. So like a long-term incentive, something like a phantom stock, if you're not familiar with that, it's just essentially a fancy cash bonus that usually gets paid at a future triggering event, like the sale of the company. And then pairing that with a short-term incentive, something that you can align on a performance or milestone based that gets paid quarterly, biannually, annually, like a profit share. And by doing this, you're going to satisfy the immediate needs of your key employees who, let's face it, they just want to cash in their pocket, right? A lot of people are strapped for cash these days. But then you're also creating this long-term carrot, if you will, to align them with the motivations of the business and to stick around for the long haul by offering them a piece should the business sell or whatever other, future triggering event you choose.
Sure. So we've got the long term, we've got the short term. I mean, obviously you still got to be a good boss. You still have to take care of your people, right?
Definitely.
Like the money helps, but it's more like the icing on the cake. And, that's what at Core Matters. I mean, that's our big focus is how do you become better leaders? How do you create better culture, put systems and processes in place? But I love this idea because I know so many entrepreneurs too, they do want to share with their employees. They do want them to have a financial reward when these types of events happen. And so you've taken all of the complexities out of it. You give them a software platform for them to manage this process. And as much as I'd love to geek out on the tech and the legal stuff, I'd love to know, tell us a little bit about the types of companies that you see this working the most effectively for, and what are some of the results that they're getting by implementing this idea of phantom stock or some kind of reward that happens at a future event?
Yeah, it's a good question. You said something really important, which is, this isn't going to replace good culture or, the other fundamentals of the business that have to be true. And that's actually, that helps me answer the question you asked, which is, what businesses does this work for best? Well, we went into this knowing that we weren't going to solve problems for high attrition industries, things like quick service or retail. That's not what these incentives or Reins is really built for. Reins is built for, the local HVAC company, the contracting construction type of business, the home service franchise type business who have folks who are in high demand but low supply, and quite frankly, they have options, right? And if you don't treat them well, if you don't align incentives with those key employees, then they're going to look elsewhere. And so, what's been really effective is a few things. Oftentimes, like you said, these business owners are super generous and they just have no idea how to do this and how to do it in a way that protects them. And so often there's a late promise. They've sort of set on the back of a napkin, hey, Joe, you're going to get 5% when the business sells, but they've never really codified it. And so that's often really a common use case for this. But one thing that's effective that we have found, just to share with your audience, is often when you're hiring new folks and you're thinking of, a key employee, a general manager, a key individual contributor, pairing one of these long-term incentives at the very least and baking it into your compensation structure is what we have found our customers do and be really, really effective to start the relationship with this employee on the right foot. And it acts as a really nice lever and competitive advantage versus, whoever else you're competing for that talent with in the market.
I love that competing piece. And the reality is a lot of people compete on pay, right? They compete on benefits. And one of the things that we think about is what are the other ways you can compete? And sure, there are other ways you compete besides just pay, benefits, long-term incentives, and those kinds of things. But the market is very, I guess, welcoming to this idea of there's money tied to it, right? There's like a financial incentive, financial reward. And we find, especially with the right kind of people that are motivated by these financial rewards, they'll work harder, they'll care more, they'll care more deeply, they'll take care of things that you didn't even know you needed to take care of.
That's right.
And I think it solves that problem of, I just wish my people would care about the business as much as I do. It makes it easier for them. Now, I still think there's the other side of, you got to care about your people if you want them to care about the business. But this is definitely icing on the cake that helps. So I know that this idea of being able to provide them some sort of financial incentive in the future is great. And you probably don't have a lot of success stories of, hey, we finally exited and this is what everybody got. But I imagine you're seeing some work on the front end. I imagine that with the clients you're working with, you're starting to see, hey, there's this small HVAC company. They were really struggling to hire key employees, and they found a service manager. They found an operations manager. They found a shop manager, and they brought these people in with this idea of phantom stock or what Reins does. And it's just really transformed things for them. Do you have any of those stories that you could share, just one or two, with our listeners, just to let them know some of the ideas that they should be thinking about right now?
Yeah, a couple comes to mind. You mentioned HVAC, so that made me think of one customer out of San Diego who actually walked away from a deal with private equity where they were going to sell the business, and they decided they wanted to operate it for a few more years, but they're getting older and operating is tough, and they have a handful of key employees that they really need to incentivize to help them step back and help bolster the business, and they can look to a new sale in the next 3 to 5 years that's maybe more aligned with the goals that they're trying to achieve. So they implemented both a phantom equity structure and a profit sharing structure using Reins, and now they're just flourishing, and the owner is so much happier to not be as elbow deep in the day-to-day. Another story I would say is actually this works well for franchises. So I had one franchise owner who came to me and was really upset because the current GM he had was not the fit that he wanted them to be. And so they were leaving, and he was really freaking out because he wasn't sure how he was going to get a new GM into a position it's quite demanding, right? It's like you're asking those people to act like an owner. And so what he did was he implemented a phantom equity structure using Reins to, like I mentioned previously, actually put this into the offer so that he could find the right candidate and align incentives, align expectations, actually, more importantly, prior to that individual starting. And he was able to actually just last week land that GM with the help of embedding this into the hiring and recruiting process. So that was a really cool story.
Nice. So, and just so that we're talking a lot about this phantom stock and everything, essentially this is like a piece of the company. Like they get a percentage of whatever the sale price is. Is that correct? Is that how it typically works?
Yeah, that's correct. You mentioned you probably don't have a lot of data points for success of like what people got. That's correct. But what you can do is you can point to things like private equity. So private equity has been using these types of structures for many years, and it's just never been thought to be taken outside of that or innovated upon. And so if you look at in the news, like if you've heard of KKR and all of the millionaires that were created when they used phantom equity in their private equity structure. So you could look at stories like that that are pretty interesting. But to answer your question, yeah, so it's essentially a promise for a future cash bonus, usually linked to the value of the stock of the business. And what I hear from business owners is they want to give ownership, but they don't want to give voting rights. They don't want to give information rights. And phantom equity is that structure. It is that structure. It's a lot simpler.
Well, I imagine too, they don't want to give equity because that could trigger tax consequences to the employees and some other stuff that's probably
That's exactly right.
where we geek out on the finance conversation,
exactly right.
podcast about that. But so I love this idea of being able to share in the upside and seeing that your employees could say, hey, if I want, I only have a small piece, but if the pie gets bigger, my small piece becomes more. Therefore, they're incentivized to stick around and that kind of stuff. If somebody leaves, do they lose all of their phantom equity?
Depends on how it's structured. So that's
Okay.
an option that business owners have to customize. Commonly, yes. Commonly, it requires employment to be paid, but doesn't necessarily have to be.
Okay. All right. No, this is cool. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of nuances that, this isn't a financial podcast, but I'm sure there are people going, hey, you know what? I've heard about this. I've thought about it. I've heard of some of these PE firms doing this, making millionaires out of their employees. I want to know more. So, Chris, how do people learn about you, or learn about Reins? How do they connect with you? And, is there any offer that you have for them that may be able to, kind of move them down the right path so they can start thinking about this?
Yeah, for sure. So listeners can go to myreins.com, REINS, myreins.com. And we actually have, if you go on the nav, there's a resources button. Highly recommend folks check that out. There's a lot of great resources to learn about these things. Or, again, regardless of whether or not you're implementing something like Reins, highly encourage you to think about long-term and short-term cash incentives for key employee retention. And then in terms of an offer, yeah, I'm super excited to offer your audience a 20% off our setup fee for Reins. And so I'll share the custom link with you, and you can put that in the show notes and the link in the description, and then they can use that link to get 20% off.
I love that. Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing your wisdom about this and letting our listeners know that there is an option out there where they can actually share in the upside of their company should they choose to exit in the future, and a great way to retain and keep some of the best employees. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you, Ryan.
Ryan England here. Thank you so much for listening to Titans of the Trades. If you're a titan in the construction, manufacturing, or skilled trades industry and would like to be a guest on my show, please visit podcast.corematters.com. If you found value in this interview, would you share this episode on social media? Just do a quick screenshot on your phone and share it with a friend or post it on social. And if you know someone that would be a great guest, tag them on social media to let them know about the show and include the hashtag Titans of the Trades. I love seeing your posts and guest suggestions. We are regularly putting out new episodes and content. To make sure you don't miss any episodes, click the subscribe button. Your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show and get me one step closer to solving the labor crisis facing the industry. Want to know more about how we're doing that? Go to our website or follow me on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening.